Hi, welcome to the TheThrottleCable. I'm Rob, and today I'm going to be sorting out the brakes on the 996. I've been wanting to do an upgrade on the brakes for a little while now. Essentially, the discs and pads were coming towards the end of their life. I was going to do a brake fluid change. I was going to get 9X to do it for me. And yeah, I was looking at what would be best to upgrade within the remits of the standard size discs and pad caliper setup. And yeah, what I've gone for is, well, first braided brake lines. I went with Hel braided brake lines. I've got experience of using them on my Megane, and I've used that on the track, and everything's been faultless there. So I went for a set of those. I've gone for some slotted rather than drilled discs. These are Sebro slotted discs. I've gone for them over the drill because I've had drilled ones on Porsches before, and I know they're pretty temperamental and they can crack out of the holes. A slotted disc, two advantages really that I bought them for. First being that you eliminate that chance of any of the little hairline cracks coming out from the drilled holes. And second, because they're not drilled, you've got more surface area to actually brake with. So I figure they're going to be much better stoppers overall. Brake fluid, I've just kept standard brake fluid for now, because I'm not planning on tracking the car. This is just a fast road fun car. So when I took it to 9X to get them to fit the braided lines, it's just standard fluid there. Brake pads, Carbotech Europe XP8s. There's loads of pad compounds out there that you can use on the road, fast road, track only. And these, again, I've used these on the Megane, and I put them just on the front of that, and literally they ripped your face off when you were trying to stop the car. They were absolutely fantastic. They create a lot of dust and they squeal if they're not warm, but other than that, they're amazing. So I've got a full setup on the car front and rear here, so the car should really be good on the brakes. In terms of the other stuff I've got hold of while I'm doing it, I've got new bolts, so they're 72mm bolts to hold the calipers. Allegedly, these stretch when you torque them up, so they're a one-time use bolt. So yeah, 8 of those for around it. New repair kits, as they're called, but these are basically the retaining springs and pins which hold the pads in. Got those front and rear. Interesting little bit of knowledge for you. The fronts, you've got the same calipers on the front of the normal 987 Cayman S, the 987 Spider, the 997, but they run a different pad and a different retainer clip. Now I've actually got the pads that are the later design, and because of that I've actually just bought the later spring clip kit, because the normal spring clip kit is too wide to fit in between the raised sections of the pad that hold the counterbalancing weights to try and eliminate any vibration and therefore noise. But yeah, by doing that, I'm running the later pads in the same caliper. When you look at the part codes, you'll see the part codes differ between the calipers, but it's basically a paint code. They're black on this and they're red on the later cars, so it's therefore got a different part code. But yeah, it just enables me to run the later pads using the later clips. And yeah, Bob's your uncle. The only other thing is the retaining screws for the discs themselves. So outside of that, I've got a full swap out here for the discs and pads. The new pads, because they're sort of semi-race pads, they don't have any sensor holes, so I'm going to be taking my sensors off and shortening them, putting the circuit across them and using them as essentially a delete, so I don't need to run any pad sensors anymore and I don't get any annoying warning lights on the dash. But yeah, it's a pretty bog standard straightforward job this. I've already got the car up in the air, I've already got the wheels off, which is evident, so I should be able to go whip round corner to corner and replace all the pads and discs. See what a difference it makes. Right, here we go. So although this is a simple job, it does however require quite a few tools when you lay them out like this. So let me give you a quick rundown of the arsenal of the tools required for the job. So here, left hand side, breaker bar. I'm going to be using that to crank out the bolts from the caliper. I then got my normal wrench once I've broken the nuts free to wind them back out. I've got a hex, a 10mm hex, triple square, Allen bolt type head, and I've also got a T55 Torx, depending on the bolt types in the caliper. After that, I've got my torque wrench, which can then set the new bolts back into the correct torque. When I need to remove the pads, I've got to take the pad pin out first, which is why I've got these needle nose pliers. I then got my hammer, and I've then got my 6mm punch. They're going to be driving the pin through once I've released the clip from it. Once I've got the pin out, I'm then going to use my slider pliers to open up the pads. Then I'm going to have to start removing the discs. So the 3-in-1 penetrant oil will help to release the face of the discs. I then need to remove 2 Phillips heads off of the face of the disc, which I've got this for. If they don't want to move, I've got an impact Phillips here, so you can whack that on the back with a hammer, and it literally shocks and turns the Phillips heads around. I've then got my rubber mallet for whacking the face of the disc to shock it to help it release. Then once I've got it off, I've got my wire brush to clean it up, and then I've got my copper grease to start putting things back together with. Outside of that, that's kind of your basic toolkit. Over here, the optional thing, because I'm going to do a brake sensor delete, i.e. I'm going to have a little defeat where I take a standard brake sensor and just turn it into a closed loop, so I no longer need to have brake wear sensors in the pads. I've got my soldering iron, I've got my solder, I've got my clips, snips, and I've got some heat shrink tube as well to tidy everything up. But yeah, that is everything you're going to need. Before I start, to make life a bit easier removing this disc from the face of the hub, I've got some good old 3-in-1 penetration spray just to release it where it's going to have rusted. And I'm just going to pop that around the inside of the face here to give me a bit more of a fighting chance to have this removed. Now if I look in here already, you can see how that penetrant spray has already worked its way up into that bolt. So that's gone right up behind the disc. So by the time I've worked my way around all 4 and come back to start again, it's going to be quite easy to basically stun these to come off the face of the hub. You hit them on the front with a hammer, a bit of a donk donk like that, and that kind of shake in the face of the disc will just loosen it off of any rust that's got it held on there. So I'm at the rear left on the car now, and I've released the Phillips heads here, and the disc is actually quite loose already, so I don't need to give it any whack with a mallet. I don't need to take it off. And I've cracked these bolts as well with the breaker bar, so they're now loose. So the steps I'm going to go through next is to 1, release the pin, 2, punch the pin straight through the caliper. That makes everything nice and loose, and it releases the spring. And then I'm going to try and pull everything out as one unit, because these are pigs to pull out, these brake sensors. So I'm going to take, well, once the pin's out, the pads and the spring will come out. To open the pads up, I'm going to be using my slide grips. So yeah, I can lever them open like that by putting them in. I can just choose the right kind of height that I need to get between the 2 pads. I'll be using where the pin goes through, basically. You can put the head of this in between the 2 and slowly kind of lever them out. The brake fluid cap I'll release from the front, just so any fluid can run back up and the air can escape. And then yeah, I'll take it all apart and put the new pads in, put the new disc on and replace. Should be pretty straightforward. I'll show you how it's done. Spring clip. For some reason he was a pig. I don't know. Spring click off. Now because these pads have got the anti-squeal plates stuck on the back of them, I'm going to have to lift the caliper off in order to get the pads out, because there's 2 prongs in each pad on those squealer stoppers that actually seat inside the caliper. So yeah, I'm just going to undo the bolts next and get the pads out. These are only hand tight because I've already broken them off, so I can see them in my hand. Which is nice and easy. By the way, you also want to release the brake pad sensors. There's a little clip, you flip it up, pull it straight out. Really nice and easy, little cantilever clip. That's all you need to do to release it at the car end rather than the brake pad end. Pop these pads out. Like these. Pull them out. I'm just going to put the bolt back in just so it is held where I want it to be. Once I sort out the pads. I'm just pulling the sensors up and straight out of the pads. Gets them out. And there's the anti-squeal plates on the back. I'm going to take these off and reuse them because I don't want them actually stuck to the new pads, because it'll allow me to change the brake pads really quickly, then I can just slot them in and out. But I will use them as backing plates behind the pads. I'll quickly show you how I get those off with a flat piece of metal essentially, slides in behind and gets rid of the glue. There you go, that's essentially everything apart now. Then I'll start putting everything together. I'll take this off when I put the pads back on, but it's proper quick now because I've got everything out. The pistons are pushed back in using the slider pliers. This is already loose. It's only being held on by these 2 retaining screws which are loosely holding it on. It'll take literally seconds to put it all back together now. So this is the back of the job broken already. So to release these anti-squeal pads off the back, because there's a bit of glue that holds them on, either use a metal ruler, or what I've got here is just a metal set square. And all I'm going to do is push it underneath the back. If you look at them, they always overlap a lower part of the pad. So here, you can get at the bottom right underneath it, and you can work that down and take them off really easily with just a flat metal blade. Don't do it with a screwdriver, because otherwise you'll bend them all over the place. You need something nice and flat and wide. Like this is almost the exact width of these, so it's a perfect tool. And the fact that I've got a handle, I can put a bit of pressure behind it. So on the Carrera's calipers, you're going to have these 72mm bolts to release. It just so happens that of the 2 types you have on the car, I have both, because on the rear I've got the 10mm Allen head, triple square, hex, whatever you might want to call these depending on what country you're in. And then on the front I've got these T55s. So yeah, helpful if you check what you've got. I mean, I had one of each, so I just used them on the end of my socket wrench to break them free. Pretty straightforward. All right, so I'm in a little bit of a cramped corner here, but I'm just going to swap the new discs and pads back on now. So yeah, pretty straightforward task. A little bit of rope, and this is what I'm going to use just to tie up my caliper. I'm going to release the bolt. Having here hand tight. Wrap this around the caliper. Just hang it. There's no stress on the brake lines. This one's going to pop straight off. I can tell already it's loose. This is straightforward, okay? Cool. Get up a little bit here, so I want to brush it off, and I don't really want to cover my shoes and brake cack. These are actually really quite clean. There's not a lot for me to brush off here, essentially. Right, done. little bit of copper grease on the face of the carrier, just so it's nice and easy to release the next time around. Whether it's me or someone else doing it, who knows. That will do the job nicely. Done. Right, new disc. All I've got to do is make sure the two screws line up where they need to go. The retainer screws, there and there. A little bit of copper grease again on the thread of that retainer screw. It just helps it for the next time the disc needs to come off. Just make sure everything gets seized on there. One. I'm going to whack the anti-squeal pads in these calipers before I put them back on as well, because it just makes it easier to do everything in that order. You can do it once it's back on, so we can still continue to do it. It's nice and easy to see at the moment. We'll have one big, one small, one big, one small on each caliper. You don't need to look, you can just do it by feeling. I think it's an alternate. Either way, you get the gist. That one. Now slip it back over the top. One when you caliper bolts. Fire up. Hand off. Tie up the hand. The caliper bolt. Again, I'm going to leave these loose until I got the pads in. It just gives me a little bit of wiggle room on the caliper. Put the pads in. Just helpful. Nice and helpful. Retainer clips in. Nice easy job again. There's one little clip. There it is. And because I'm working in about a square inch of space here, I'm going to pull it out. There it is. When these are brand new, like this one, you can normally just slot them with by hand. You need to make sure the hole's facing straight up. So make it easy to put the clip in. The spring clip. There you go, that's got salt all the way in by hand. Nice and easy. And I should probably be able to put this in by hand too. You may notice I put that clip in by hand. No smoke and mirrors. It's just easy. When you do the front and the back, the process is exactly the same apart from one bolt. On the front caliper, there is a little bolt right here that retains the brake hose, and you've got to undo that because this is where the solid line is coming up to the, my now braided hose, but the flexible hose where it joins it. So you've got to undo that so it's free because it's coming out as part of the unit. With the brake caliper, yeah, same process. So yeah, you're gonna release the clip, little spring clip at the back, pull that out, punch the pin through, that releases the top spring and the pads to come out. Again, if you've got the squealer pads on the back, they're not going to come out. So you've got to release your two bolts, here and here, in order to get the caliper off. Then to remove the disc, two screws, whack the face of the disc a couple of times just to the shock of it will release it from the back. Take everything apart, put it all back together with new stuff. Easy peasy. the caliper bolts, 85 newton meters, 63 foot-pound of torque. Where are you, 85? There we go, done. Right, so here are the brake pad sensors. You can start to see where mine have been worn away. If you can see this here, the front surface gets worn away and there's a cable that loops around and back along. So there's one cable which connects these two plugs together. It leaves one plug, comes down the length, wraps around here, wraps around the second sensor of the second pad and then returns. So as soon as they get worn through, that will break the cable and then let the dash light come on to tell you need to change your pads. So quite simply, to make a defeat, in order so you don't need to run these, you don't need to tie up big cables, I'm just going to snip these, twist the cables together, solder them together, and then shrink wrap them so they're nice and safe. And that'll just give me a little stubby bit of cable which is wrapped and soldered together, ready to go back in the car and keep that brake light off. Nice and straightforward. Okay, so here it is. This is the two cables soldered together. I've twisted them slightly just so they've got a little bit of resistance against each other naturally. Then I'll be putting this shrink wrap tube over the top. This has actually got adhesive down the middle, so when you heat that up, it shrinks, it seals the cables and it sticks it together as well. So you end up with a really nice kind of strong connection, and these two cables aren't going to be going anywhere after that. Then I can pop them all back in the car. So yeah, 4 of these to do. So here are 2 cables. Nice and easy to do, especially with the heat shrink around them. They're nice and strong. And then at the end, I've just pinched the ends together because these are full of glue. So if you just give them a little squeeze at the end, it makes sure you've got a nice seal so no water can get back up in there.